My name is David Kratzer. I'm the township manager here at Lower Makefield Township. We have an update on a couple items, and then obviously we're going to open it up for sort of questions and answers, and share as much information as we have at this point. So the first item that we just wanted to make a mention of related to the repairs to the rear yards at 18 and 20 Maplevale. So Derek, if you could provide an update for the benefit of those here, and then also those that may be watching this remotely or maybe watching it later.
Sure. Thank you. Just so everyone's aware, obviously the contractor was out there working last week, stabilizing the immediate properties of 18 and 20 Maplevale, along with temporarily armoring the remaining piece of drainage pipe. At this point in time, they did stabilize as much reasonable land as possible without the necessary permits to continue on to the canal property or the abutting canal property. So they have immediately stabilized those two properties and armored as much of the drainage pipe to allow stormwater flow out of that remaining piece of pipe. At this time, the contractors also procured the materials to complete the next phase once the permits are received. So the pipe is actually being delivered to our yard here tomorrow, and new inlets and new outlet structures for that new and rebuilt drainage line are anticipated to be delivered early next week. So we will have all the materials procured once the permit and approval from DCNR is received to continue on with the work. So that's where we sit with those two properties right now.
Okay. The next item we wanted to, again, briefly sort of touch on had to do with something that came up at the last Board of Supervisors meeting. I think it was Mr. Adams that raised concerns regarding sediment buildup on two township-owned parcels. Again, in the interest of trying to increase sort of the carrying capacity of that stream. So perhaps Isaac or Paul could comment on where we stand with that issue.
Thanks, Dave. From the engineering office side, the cleanup immediately after the storm, obviously Derek and Public Works. The cleanup just after the storm, Derek and the Public Works Department did a lot of work for some of that larger debris. When it comes to clearing and really a full cleaning of the stream goes, it requires permitting for that process, and that is currently underway. So that's permitting that we're preparing that involves some plans to go along with it to the agencies that would grant that, which would be the DEP when it's within the stream banks there. So that's something we're looking to get to them submitted as soon as we can, and then when they look to grant us that approval, we'll be ready to go for that additional length of stream bank that we'll look to clear out.
Okay. The next was just a brief, again, update on our coordination with county, state, and federal partners relative to response. We met with the county and PEMA yesterday to have a discussion about technical assistance that may be available and sort of educational and informational assistance that may be available through PEMA and Bucks County. PEMA has agreed to conduct a flood insurance session. Again, there was some discussion at the Board of Supervisors meeting regarding the ability to obtain flood insurance. There were some that articulated their belief that they were unable to obtain flood insurance. That is incorrect. Both FEMA and PEMA have confirmed that. And so they are looking at doing an informational session to provide some just general information and education on flood insurance. In terms of assistance that may be available in terms of response, no determination has been made at this point. All of the information that's been provided to us by affected property owners has been reported to the county, which in turn has been provided to PEMA. Just so you're aware, there are monetary thresholds that need to be met in order to receive state or federal assistance. So we would encourage you to continue to report damage that you've sustained as a result of the storm. And once we receive that information, we'll provide that information to PEMA and FEMA. But it is, I can't stress the importance of making sure that regardless of the significance of the damage that you believe you may have sustained, it's important that you report that information so that we can in turn provide that to state and federal agencies for purposes of support. So again, as of yesterday, they have not made any determination on whether there's going to be either public assistance available, which would be assistance that's available to the community as a whole as it relates to our response, or individualized assistance. So again, we've done what we can at this point to report that information, and we'll continue to obviously advocate on behalf of the residents and the affected property owners. But ultimately, it's a matter of whether those respective sort of thresholds are met. Senator's office and Perry Warren's office, again, is intimately involved in this issue, again, in interfacing with the state agencies and ultimately the federal agencies, as is Representative Fitzpatrick's office and his staff. So again, we continue to try to understand what may be available, and we're collectively sort of advocating on behalf of the residents in that regard. In terms of the second phase of the Maplevale Phase 2 project, just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Isaac or Paul, again, I don't know if you can provide an update on where we stand with those additional planned improvements.
I'll let Paul on our design team give our latest update on those.
Thanks, Isaac. So internally, we have another team that is working on the Phase 2 design and permitting. So that is in the works. We're looking to get the design complete as soon as possible and move on to permitting authorization to begin construction.
I'll just add for the Phase 2, obviously the discussion recently, what we want to do when we have the design theoretically finalized on our end, bring it to the township, have the opportunity for folks to see what is proposed. If there's feedback that as the neighborhood you have for what is in there, or if you have questions of why it's laid out in certain ways, that's what we want to make sure we have before it goes to a construction phase or a bidding phase. So that's something we'll continue to update everybody on. And when it's brought to the township as an engineered final condition, then that's where the final adjustments for any feedback from the local residents would come into play before we would move to a bidding phase.
Sounds good. Thank you. And then just the final update again before we open it up to you for questions and our responses. Just an update. There was again some discussion, or there has been discussion at the Board of Supervisors meetings regarding sort of longer term solutions that would involve sort of a broader look, a more comprehensive look at the drainage basin and then also the watershed as a whole. That was part of our conversation again with PEMA yesterday, but we've also been meeting with or have met with some private consultants that have done this type of work throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, looking at floodplain restoration, other opportunities that may be available to address sort of upstream conditions. Again, that's a longer term process in making sure that there is sort of this comprehensive strategy and plan as it relates to those improvements. But that is in the works. And again, we're looking for to leverage sort of that professional expertise and technical expertise of some folks that have done work not only in this area within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but also beyond. So we had a meeting this morning with, for example, a consultant that again has done this work throughout Pennsylvania, but has also been part of teams that have responded to events like the events in Ellicott City, for example, in Maryland, where there was significant flooding that was experienced. So we're trying to address this issue in terms of, you know, the immediate response to the storm event, trying to leverage, again, resources that are available on our county, state, and federal levels. And then, you know, the township is committed to looking at things comprehensively, looking again at upstream conditions and trying to address those upstream conditions, given that, you know, the folks that are at the that are in the Mapleville neighborhood or at the bottom of the topography, if you will. And so that's where we stand with those items. Again, the primary purpose of this is to answer any questions that you may have. You know, before we sort of open it up to your questions and comments, just would continue to encourage you as it relates to obviously the issue of assistance that probably is of interest to the majority in this room and the majority listening. Continue to report those damages, because again, if we do not achieve those thresholds, then some of that assistance will you know, likely or would not be available in terms of a response to the event. So happy to answer any questions that you have regarding any of those items that we touched on briefly. Happy to go into additional detail on those items. Happy to answer any questions regarding anything that we have not touched. So if you could just come up to the mic for the benefit of those that may be listening remotely.
I'm Parker Cohen, and I work for State Representative Perry Warren. Thanks for the invitation today. I just wanted to let everyone here know, township and citizens here, that Representative Warren worked during this past session, to get the flood task force bill passed in the House. It is currently in the Senate committee, where it is being looked at, and Senator Sanaciro, who also represents this area, it has a similar bill in the PA Senate. So we are paying attention to what's going on in the area. The representative has been out in people's yards. He's been, you know, roadways many times, as has the senator. And that has had 3 meetings with the Secretary of Transportation, which is a little bit more upper Makefield Township, but very aware of what's been going on here in lower Makefield. So I want people to be aware that your state representatives definitely know what's going on, and we like to keep in touch with what's going on here. So thanks.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Parker. You guys have been great to work with, and appreciate all your efforts. So thank you. Yes, sir. Sure. Yes, please.
186 Tillsville Road. My question is, I heard you say something about building all my retaining walls to the side went across the street. Is that anything that the state or county would do? I had about 100 foot of retaining walls. My driveway, everything went across the street. And you were mentioning something about stuff like that being done. I mean, does that fall on me, or will I get help with that?
So the damage that you're talking about, have you provided a cost associated with the repair of those items?
My daughter's been doing a lot of stuff, so I don't know if she did or not.
Okay.
I'll have her check on that.
Yeah. If you could check on that, because again,
That's quite a bit, that retaining wall.
Right. Exactly. And so, if you could check to confirm that information has been reported, as I said, we'll take that information and then we'll in turn provide it to the county emergency management agency.
Yeah, because Morrison did a nice job on the pipe and everything else that had to be done, but
yeah,
didn't go any further.
Okay.
All right, that was my only question, because
Yeah,
I heard you talk
yes.
about that.
Yep. So again, if you could make sure that information is conveyed to us, and then we will in turn report that to the county, who will.
Because
make
I have
sure
a
that
book that
FEMA-
runs all the way from the golf course all the way down, and
Sounds good.
I guess you know what happened.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sounds good, sir. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Robbie Kohler, Mapleville, 14, the bottom of the topography. Called it. Got a number of questions here, but as I was taking more notes on some of y'all's answers and descriptions before we started, it started all circling around one thing, and that is specifically, apart from this whole once in a lifetime storm rhetoric, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but sure we get a lot of them around here, it seems. What happened? And what of what's happened and what you've seen now as you're repairing it, as you're seeing it 4 weeks out, like the rest of us are, because I got a list of other things that I've noticed 4 weeks out now. What do you see that could have been done different if there was failure somewhere? Or most importantly, the answer I'm looking for is going to answer the question of, are we reasonably confident this isn't going to happen again? And how do we believe and trust that?
Sure. So
I'll repeat it. Want me to? I'll repeat all of it. That way I can see it. My biggest question here related to all this is we're not hearing a whole lot of admissions of, hey, something went wrong, my bad. But what happened? And most importantly, what is happening now? What have you learned and changed to make us feel more confident that this is going to work this time?
Isaac, I don't know if you want to start and we can all fill in or.
No, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I guess from an engineering perspective, right, we look at kind of the facts of what came through, at least this specific storm, right? You had about 6 inches of rain within that short time frame that overwhelmed a lot of the systems that are in place. That includes the pipes, and includes the streams. You had a couple of locations that experienced blockages that now, instead of the water going through the stream, it found another way, went over the road or through the road and driveways and everything else. So a couple of factors that we've observed kind of led to really the volume of water that wound up in the Maplevale Drive neighborhood. And those are some of the things, at least in that short term, that we've been talking about, which is clearing out, streamways to try to ensure that if there is a big volume of water coming down again, that it's able to get through the stream and not have to find a different way. We're looking at, the permitting that we're doing looks at not only ways to kind of resolve what was damaged, but also to try to make it more robust and add armoring or ways to have it clear for
just not work out the way you thought it would from the first pass of this in F21?
Well, I'll be honest, the infrastructure in the township and really anywhere that you'll look in towns isn't designed for that amount of water in that short amount of time. So I've mentioned in some of the meetings before where it's not so much what's the pipe size that can handle, 6 inches of rain in a half an hour. It's when your existing infrastructure that you kind of plan for your most storms, when that's overwhelmed, how do you manage the water in the area to avoid, serious property damage? So that's part of the process that we're going through now, the permitting. I'll mention since the last meeting we have, there's obviously rightfully so a lot of talk about schedule. We did receive the emergency permit from DEP. Derek mentioned there's kind of additional step to that with DCNR, the other agency, with the canal and getting permitting. But it's a look at, not only repairing it, but how to make it more, capable of handling larger capacity. And that's what we're looking at as part of that process. I mentioned
it wasn't raining that hard that day. It wasn't anything spectacular. I know a lot of volume came down, and why I'm saying that is in context of we're an hour from the shore. Hurricanes are coming. It's just what happens. It doesn't have to be the eye coming across here, but those waves are bringing a lot of volume of rain at any particular time. So
I think that, again, I think one of the things we learned has to do with the carrying capacity of the stream. So it's not, there wasn't an infrastructure failure. There was a breach that occurred in terms of the capacity of that stream to handle that volume of water. And so what ends up happening is, in terms of the physical infrastructure, the engineered hard infrastructure, and these guys can correct me, there's a drainage area that's the neighborhood essentially, and that might be 17 to 20 acres. I don't know exactly, but it's close. It's about 17 to 20 acres. When that stream breached, all of that upstream drainage area, essentially the volume came breached the stream banks and then made its way down to the low point, which again, unfortunately is at your home and your neighbors' homes and so forth. So I think what, we recognize sort of collectively is that in those significant storm events, not your typical storm events, but in those significant storm events, that we need to look at the stream and the capacity of the stream to maintain water within its banks. And so if that doesn't occur, if that doesn't occur, there's nothing that we can engineer essentially downstream that's going to, prevent this, from happening again.
That
So-
stream, again, most of y'all know we're relatively new to the neighborhood. The morning after that first township meeting, my son and I went out to go look at it. We didn't know what the stream was everybody was talking about.
Mm.
We saw the part right across right there on Highland. Is it deeper or wider in other parts? Because that's not a very
Right. It's very shallow. Yeah.
stream.
Yeah,
I mean,
correct.
if that's how somehow that
Hmm.
got overwhelmed, I mean, I spent most of my entire life in kayaks on rivers. It doesn't take too much of that experience to understand how things flow.
Hmm.
That's not a wide stream. I mean, does it go a long way or is it? That's okay.
Yeah.
As you go upstream, at that point near Highland Drive, the stream is probably maybe 20 feet wide
That's the only part
along
of
the
the
bottom,
No fairness. That's
and it's only about 4 feet deep to the embankment. As you go further upstream, it varies. It becomes deeper. In some places, it's wider.
it enough.
Well, obviously, with the storm that happened, it's not enough to carry all of that water. And that's why we need to look at what can be done maybe to increase the carrying capacity of that stream so that it'll reduce the chance of it overtopping and then flowing down into your neighborhood.
Right. So one of the things that we're, when I talked about, our discussion with consultants that have done this work, I mean, the first step likely is going to be to walk the entire reach of that stream, which is about a mile. And so look at opportunities upstream to increase the capacity of whether it's the stream or whether it's the upstream stormwater facilities. So there's basins upstream, for example. Can there be retrofitting done of those basins to capture water and not even have it conveyed downstream, right? So that's sort of the initial plan when we talk about sort of some of the consulting work, is to walk the stream, do a complete assessment of the full reach, which again is about a mile upstream from the ultimate discharge point, and identify opportunities to capture water upstream, deal with water upstream, increase capacity of that stream channel, so that again we don't have that downstream breach that occurred in this storm event.
That lays out to my next question here. Isaac, you were talking about with the phases and being open to the township to talk about things you're planning and all that. I'd like to get ahead of that because the stream I care most about is the one that came down Mapleville Drive straight. We had one come that way. We had one come diagonally. That got all my neighbors. My house, unfortunately, has a unique apex of the culmination point. I've got video of a jungle gym floating down, coming, rolling around the corner, and then taking a right turn down my driveway, smashing in my truck on the way out to the canal. Gambles are suffering that too. There's no drains that down there, except for at the very top on Taylorsville. I'd like to talk to somebody about this. I mean, my needs at this point are self-preservation, not hoping this next round of thinking we got it figured out, it's going to work. Hopefully will, but I'm buying a new driveway next week with the grading to get it so the water doesn't pool 5 feet up next to my house and come gushing in and take out everything we own again. Can you come by and talk about this? And I can show you where this stream was coming if you're not aware of that already. It wasn't just diagonal. And y'all heard me at the first meeting talking about if you don't have a hole in your backyard, no one's really coming by right now. That's not changed that much. And
Absolutely.
that's me being nice.
That's the goal of the things we're working on, is to make sure that when it's constructed, that it's actually going to be doing what it needs to for the neighborhood, right? It's not meant to be, here's another project and, fingers crossed or anything like that, that it's going to work. We want to get the feedback of where it's going to be actually constructed so that it's, implemental and actually going to be helping the situation. And
My concern with that is more
as well.
no one's asked yet. And
Yeah,
that's-
no, it will be for
It's
sure.
been
but,
a straight river. I mean, I didn't realize this was going on until I came into the house and saw a Prius floating into my front yard door.
Right, sure.
Yeah, and we recognize the impact was felt, beyond just those two property owners, right? That's very visual.
It was stunning. Yeah, that's my
It's
friends. I show them
it's-
that first.
Right. I mean, obviously that's what, folks have picked up on. But again, we're committed we recognize that the impact is broader than that. And we're committed to looking at things, more comprehensively than has been done in the past. I mean, again, all of us sitting up here are relatively new to the township. So this issue that may have been a historic issue in terms of it happened, prior or whatever it may be. Not making an excuse, I'm just pointing out that none of us were in the positions that we're currently in. And so we understand that as you sit here as residents and you're communicating that, we communicated this before, and we understand the trust issue, right? And the lack of trust. I can assure you that the perspective that's being put on this issue is different than the perspective that previously was put on this issue.
I mean,
And that's not, I'm not necessarily pointing fingers and saying we have all the answers at this point. But I can assure you that all of us have done work in these areas, in other areas of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and are willing and committed to bringing the tools that are necessary to address this issue here, both in terms of internal tools and in terms of, again, leveraging relationships that exist beyond Bucks County, beyond Lower Makefield Township, to try to address this issue in a way that provides the most assurance possible to address this issue.
and that leads into my last question with all this. I mean, some of our properties have some unique topographical features to them that only made this worse. He was asking about his retaining wall. I've got a similar situation in mind where it's a railroad tie wall. I mean, this water could have gone right past into my backyard like it did on the right side of my house into the canal. But this thing's there, and it made it come up almost 5.5 feet. At a certain point, my door said, "We're done with that. Come on in." That's the problem, but that's a thing that can be fixed and immediately give me peace of mind and safety on there.
Yeah.
Got 3 gigantic bulldozers, 2 doors down, waiting for permits, not doing anything. How reasonable is it to have one come over and do this? I mean, I'm literally paying a guy 10 grand next week to do it, the top part, but those are the types of things some of us need because it's immediate. And that's your leap of faith. You guys are the new guys on there giving us another shot at that. Nobody in this room or on these calls will fault you for that. And everybody will secretly hope you're going to really do it. And that means something.
Yeah. And
Acts
we
of good
understand
faith matter.
and we need to demonstrate that, right? I mean, we need to, this is,
Who do I talk to about that aspect of it? I mean,
so you want to,
I'm sure it's all contract. You probably can't just bring the guy over, but
No, one thing that David, I believe, was tasked me with tomorrow morning or tomorrow as soon as possible is to meet with you. I know you reached out to one of the supervisors to schedule meetings, so that was tasked to me tomorrow. So I will be glad to meet with you as soon as you have the available time and see what the situation is.
you guys are terrible about calling people back. We could have coordinated that out outside of here, but yeah, definitely tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I think I think there was an attempt to come to your house twice, and neither time was there a response. So I
Being
don't.
professionally respectful right now in the context of that one. Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
You guys have been answering the questions well. So
Okay,
thanks.
you're welcome. Thank you.
I wanted to touch on just one thing because you kind of brought it up and Dave mentioned the longer term approach of kind of taking a look at the whole drainage area, which is the whole upstream, acres and acres. A better understanding for the residents of how, an engineering perspective looks at drainage and how to design capacity and all that. It really comes down to the factor of time, right? So the storm, if there's a storm that comes in, it rains all day, even more than one day. If it's not that intense, the system, realistically handles it all the time. It's that intense burst of a lot of rain in a short amount of time. And for the streams as well, that's where it starts running the problems. It's very similar to like a traffic jam, basically. If everyone's hopping on the road at the same time, it just immediately gets backed up and jammed up. Not necessarily that the highway has to be completely reconstructed, but it has to be looked at to figure out when that happens, how do you manage it, right? So on the water perspective, that's what we are looking at with these projects. It's if there is a short amount of time where you get these big intense events, where's the water going to go and how to best manage that? On average, for most of the storms, it'll, you know, if it's raining kind of the normal amount in this area for the most part, it'll handle it. And I'll mention the normal amount changes, right? So that's what we're looking at now, is to identify how we can better prepare the system for these more intense periods of short amount of times.
That's, I know where Pat's going with that, and we're not seeing that. It rains 5 minutes and all of a sudden the whole street is a river again. It's weird. It's unnerving,
That's why I
especially
did like the
considering-
short torrential pour.
Not even that torrential. We had a neighborhood meeting a couple weeks ago, and hey, it's going to rain. By the time we got home, it was almost done, but the streets are flooded again. I mean, it's like bring out the kayak, and that's what's spooky, because it's like that.
Mm.
I mean, you're the engineers. I don't understand how that one's working, but that's what I need to look into.
I hear you. Yeah.
I don't
Just-
know how-
Just
I
a
don't know
bit
how
of an
much that
understanding
water-
of how it's
Yeah.
looked at with the amount of flow and the amount of time is really what's the
It's not
calculations. Yeah.
linear. It's weird.
At Gamble 16 Maple Vale. We had two rainstorms since, and both the times the streets were literally almost flooded to the top. Now they went down fast because we didn't get any more rain. But every time it rains, I woke up in the middle of the night the other night to keep looking to see when we were getting that threatened tornado, hail, rainstorm. And every time it rained, the streets would fill up. But the good thing was it stopped and then they got to drain. But every single time, water does not go down the drains properly. I showed pictures to somebody already about it only goes through this much of the drain. Now that was probably why our drain didn't blow out, because we're the last one over. Water doesn't get down the drain, but the streets flood every time it rains. Why? And wasn't even a lot of rain we've had since the 15th.
Yeah, there's definitely, and we'll continue to look at it. I think we're essentially retrofitting a condition at this point, right? When your development, and again, was developed back in the 50s, there wasn't stormwater infrastructure there was limited stormwater infrastructure that was installed, right? So now we're dealing with more intense rain events, more frequent rain events. And so the water needs to be managed. And so we need to look at opportunities within that development and other developments that are not newly constructed, but constructed some time ago that lack infrastructure to manage today's realities. And so that's part of what we're doing as well.
Well, why isn't there any drains like on Taylorsville and Meadow so it would catch some of the water?
So
before it
again,
came down to-
Taylorsville is a road under the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
What about Meadow?
We've talked to PennDOT about the need for stormwater infrastructure. Now, historically, the stormwater infrastructure that was on Taylorsville Road was a roadside swale system that has since been either built over by individual property owners or silted in. So yeah, there's definitely a need for additional capital improvements to the Commonwealth's roadway.
There isn't one drain on Meadow still.
Right. So again,
Not one. And there's a whole bunch of houses and they're before us. So where does their water come? We get theirs too.
Right.
Taylorsville too.
and then again,
And then now I believe the Scudder Falls Bridge, because that's the only thing that I can see that came new since, because we've had flooding before, but not to this capacity, not 3 feet in my basin, maybe 3 inches. There's a reason why.
Yeah, and those roads you mentioned that are just lack drains or lack infrastructure, to Dave's point, those like historic conditions are exactly what we're looking at to try to improve with these projects.
With the amount of rain that came, because I have a container on my patio and I got almost 5 inches
During the storm.
during the
was it?
storm. Yes,
Yeah.
because I use it for watering.
Yeah.
And it wasn't 6 inches. It wasn't,
It was close. Well, I go off of just the locations that they measure.
well,
you know,
I know what my backyard got.
They
My
had close to
neighbor
6
got
there, yeah.
flooded, which
Yeah.
has never gotten flooded before.
Either way, over
know,
5
it's
is
a
really
big
significant.
River,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
yeah. But like I said, what are you going to do now? September is coming. It's hurricane season. You know, yeah. Well, I'm waiting. I'm tired of buying water heaters and heating and air conditioning units and replacing souvenirs and schlepping out mud from my house and walls. You know, maybe hurricane season to you, but it's a disaster to me if we get any kind of rain. And I'm sorry, even that those 2 storms with a few inches of rain, the streets flood up now. And that when you constructed that street, you designed it so it was supposed to come. I don't understand that. That didn't work either. I mean, why are we getting water in the street with a little bit of rain? And that has to be done now. I mean, September is coming.
Sure, no,
And the other thing is, I watched that rain come up. And who is going to be legally liable if somebody dies? Because I'm standing here saying that this is a problem. And the amount of water and the amount of force that it came down ruined all the cars that were at my party. I mean, they were cars. We are people. Suppose there's people out there. What is going to happen? Who is going to be responsible if somebody dies? Well, everybody can't be on vacation all the time. And everybody would try to go out there and save their car. I mean, the people next door to me lost 7 of their own personal vehicles. I mean, we've lost so many, it's ridiculous. Probably 9, 10, 11, 12, about 14. I mean, I'm not saying we got a competition here, but it's important. People will go out there and try, and suppose they get wiped under with this water. You know, it's a problem. I'm telling you, all you people are my witnesses. I don't want to see anybody hurt, injured, or dead. And that's where I see it coming if something isn't done now.
we understand that, Miss. Mr. Adams, could you please come to the mic so that
Shit.
could
Something that she commented on. I'm a 72-year resident of Taylorsville Road, probably the last person that parents bought an original home there. When the flooding was coming down Taylorsville Road and people that just don't have any common sense were driving through it with children in cars, I called 911. Eventually, I had a terrible time with those people. First I get New Jersey, then I get the lady I kept saying to her, Lower Makefield Township. And all she keeps going back at me is, you mean Upper Makefield Township? I said, no. Finally, the police officer arrives, puts his car across the road, and I went out with an umbrella and spoke to the police officer, and I says, we got a serious situation here. Those people in those homes on the front of Mapleville, on Taylorsville Road, have basements. And I think you should get the fire department here or yourself with a bullhorn and warn them, don't go in their basement. Do not get electrocuted. And the police officer said to me, go back in your home. And he rolled the window up. And I went back in my
Hi, I'm Michael McPeak from 24 Maplevale, and I have some questions actually answers to instead of we're thinking about. We're talking about the second phase. I heard there was a third phase. Is the third the final phase?
When you say third phase, what,
Well, how many phases are this to have the water problem completely fixed?
so in terms of the phase projects, I mean, again, Maplevale Drainage Project was two phases, right? So the phase that was.
Okay,
was
the first
was
meeting they said it
implemented.
was 3.
And then the second phase, which is the addition of new inlets, there was some sediment removal from that stream that we're referencing on the, I guess it would be the west side of Taylorsville Road. So that was the initial planned Maplevale project. I think if we're referring to phase 3, perhaps you're referring to this sort of broader drainage basin watershed plan that we're more comprehensive sort of plan. Is that what we're referring to?
I could be. You just said the first meeting, they said there's a third phase. They didn't say what third phase was. So that could be what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So if that's what we're talking about, what's the timeline to start that? What's the timeline to finish that? And is it comprehensive enough to grow with all the extra development that's happening? This development did not flood before there's more development in the township. And I'm not saying you shouldn't develop the township, but when you add something that's going to cause water, you can't just do it on that 50-acre lot. You have to do where it affects downstream. And that's why this development is in the condition that it's in. It was fine for 50 years. It's rained for 50 years. Yes, it may be getting harder, but this was not a record rain for Bucks County. I remember 8-10 years ago, there's 11 inches in Doylestown in an hour and a half. It's not record rain. It's just really heavy rain. So you can't pretend it won't happen again.
Sure.
Once a year, once every 5 years, whatever. It will happen again. And records will happen. They'll blow these away. But the next phase has to do not what it will cover today, but what will happen with the future. Or you've got to stop developing. I mean, it will get worse if you plan the road for today and then traffic picks up. It's immediately some roads are obsolete the day they open up. And this infrastructure sounds like it's going to be the same thing for the water. It's going to be obsolete the day you open it up. That creek overflowed, but that creek overflowed because it blocked up at the pipe under the road because of the debris in the creek. So it wasn't just the creek. The physical infrastructure wasn't wide enough to handle the branches and stuff coming down the creek. They will be coming down the creek in the future. That has to be factored into the change. It means digging up the whole road and making a 10-foot wide by 3-foot high one. That's what it means. But a 3-foot pipe that's not going to take the branches is not an answer. Well, in addition to that, cleaning that particular one out, cleaning out the ones on our street that happen, from what I hear frequently, people are cleaning out branches from that street. I would like to suggest that you put a camera near those drains running 24/7 or motion censored to see how little rain it takes for that street to get it. Because if we called you during that rain Saturday and a half ago, by the time you got from this building to there, the heavy part of the rain had stopped and the street cleaned up a little because it was a short, heavy rain. You need better observation and people can't do it. Cameras can. A few other points. The meeting right now at 3:30, I've heard more than a few neighbors say that the 3:30 time is to keep our numbers down. The neighborhood is invested in this. Some of the key people that have been leading this aren't here now because they have work. I don't know if they're Zooming or not, but this time doesn't work for this type of community. Most of the people are working. I'm working. I know a few other people here are working. We took time off from work to be here. The time is very inconvenient for this. I know as a person who works on the clock, you don't really want to do the nights, but to meet the needs of the constituents, this is not the time to have a meeting. So,
Okay, we can look at that.
I think I'll be quick. I'm Nathan Leventhal. I'm at 12 Plymouth Lane. I'm up on Hilltop. I think I'm like kind of the unique, maybe probably the only person that got hit up there. Not kind of the same way, but when everything got overflowed and went over whatever the creeks are that overflowed above me, it all came across the roads and through people's yards. And I'm like on a ridiculous hill. I mean, my driveway is like this, but like it just came down in a new way that had never come before because it overflowed people's yards and went right into my basement. And I appreciate you looking all the way up and not just down at the bottom also, although clearly they need a lot of help down there with the flowing. But my wife went online and uploaded pictures or emailed pictures to somebody, and I'm just worried that I'm like outside of the scope of like the lens of where everybody's looking. And because we got an email maybe almost a week and a half ago, maybe almost 2 weeks ago, somebody saying like, oh, they'd be right out to assess damage, and because we reported it, but we didn't report any numbers. So in the interest of hitting those thresholds, the person said they were coming out to assess the damages so that we could then report them, or then it would be reported, but nobody's come out. And I just want to make sure that I'm actually on a list someplace, and I don't know how to check that. Like that somebody is coming out and that I am reporting the damage and trying to help everybody else out by getting that threshold up or whatever. Cause I'm in I'm at the top of the hill where God, it never should have flooded really. Right.
I don't know. Do you have?
Yeah, I don't have access to the spreadsheet right here, but we could definitely check that and come out and meet with you.
Okay. Yeah. My wife got something from like zoning, somebody's on the zoning or something, said they would come out to assist them. I don't know who it was, but it was like,
It might have been Mike.
It might have been Mike, and
I
he
just
visited
don't want to get missed.
dozens and dozens of properties.
Right.
Are you available tomorrow?
Yeah.
What time would work for you?
I'm a school teacher, so I'm at home all day. My daughter's car broke. She has my car. I'm kind of trapped. I dropped off. I got plenty of work to do on my house though. Like I'm ripping the 3 feet of water in the basement, and there's a lot to do. So I'll be there all day.
Would you like to? I could come out and meet with you like 8:30. Sound good, or a little bit later work better for you?
Whatever. I'll talk to you afterwards, maybe, or like I don't know.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Just a reminder for the board, we do have questions and comments online.
Hi, I'm Lorena Stoddard. I live at 220 Meadow Drive, and I've spoken to you before. Have you already figured out where all the water came from for our development? Have you figured that out? Do you know where it came from? You told us at the last meeting that it did not come from the Bridge Authority. Did you figure out if any of it came from the wall, the retaining wall, or did you figure out that it's just from the hill and the creek? Did you take note of that? So yes or no?
Yeah, for the most part, I did investigate everything with Joint Toll Bridge Commission and PennDOT in terms of 95 and the sound wall. For the majority of the flows, it was creek flow from the unnamed tributary. Meeting with Joint Toll Bridge Commission and PennDOT, they do have an outlet pipe that outlets off of 295 where this unknown tributary goes underneath, right by would be the way station there, the rest stop. This tributary actually does go underneath 295 and continues up to the Merrick. I don't know what that development is called. Merrick Drive back there is kind of where this starts, where that farmland preservation is just before the golf course. They do have an outlet that's there. That outlet was pre-existing prior to the widening project of 295. They actually decrease flows just for the way they redid piping and things like that. They actually have a lot more flow going into the massive basin that's at Taylorsville and 295. And so in the most part, they almost kind of decrease that somewhat, that flow that would be entering there. In terms of the sound wall, we did walk this.
Did that water Where did that water go? The decreased water,
So now the way they now piped it, it almost goes to the big retention basin at Taylorsville Road. The
okay,
way
and
they
that didn't overflow. You told us. that
Correct.
last
Yes,
week.
that did not overflow. That functioned as intended. So they increased flows to the basin to retain, to meet the new current road standards. Back when 295, 95 was developed, there was no such thing as retention basins. It was get flow off as soon as possible. Now with the new impervious surface, they got to retain so much flow. So that's the way when they redesigned and redid the road, that's why they repiped the majority of it to retain down in that retention basin, infiltration basin that one is. In terms of the sound wall, there are a few select inlets behind the sound wall. But I would say it's off of Lower Hilltop and the parcels off of Concord Lane. There were a few inlets back there. Joint
Inlets,
Bridge-
are you talking about creeks? What are you talking about when you say inlets? Is that the drain that's coming
inlet,
off
yeah,
the
like an
roadway?
inlet where rainwater would fall into.
So the gutter,
Into a pipe, you know,
Into a pipe.
to get to a
Okay.
pipe. There were a few located back there, I believe, I want to say 4 or 5. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. And all they do, believe it or not, they go, the inlet is there on the backside, the residential side of the sound barrier, and actually just goes under the sound barrier and connects to the inlet that's on 295 and then goes down to the big infiltration basin. So again, any of those sound barrier ones end up down in the infiltration basin down at Taylorsville Road.
and the infiltration basin goes under Taylorsville Road and
Yeah, so when it has a low flow orifice because it's meant as an infiltration basin. So it's meant to retain water and infiltrate into the ground. When it gets to certain elevation of height and it can no longer before it breaches its banks, the outlet flow for that goes under Taylorsville Road and connects up to the stream, this unnamed tributary on the east side of Taylorsville Road on our part, like near our parcel. So it'd be
oh,
this.
right outside, right where Lisa lives, right? That one little house that got flooded.
It would be, I don't know, I'm not sure where Lisa lives, but it would.
There's
be-
only one house outside of the Maple Vale development, close to 295.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah. But it's almost next to the on-ramp. So it's pretty far. It's almost separated by our entire parcel. It's kind of where the outlet head wall is.
Goes down. And that goes down onto Lower Makefield plot and land.
So that stream continues down that plot along 295, along the Scudder's Fall Bridge where it starts going over the river and then actually dumps into the canal. So that stream eventually does dump into the DCNR's canal
So the basin dumps into the canal through
eventually.
our plot of land.
It's actually within their right of way, but yeah, along.
Well, it's our land, but they have a right of way to our land, right?
Correct. Yes,
Right.
correct. Yes.
So now let me be gracious. Let me say thank you for digging out the creek overnight at the end of that meeting when Dan said to you guys, is there anything we can do? And they said we could clean the creek. So by morning, somewhere miraculously, 2 years later, he also got emergency permission to dig the creek for 500 feet. And I assume at this point it was more than 500 feet. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Biggest concern is that the creek is dug. And now that plot of land that we own that has the right of way for the bridge authority, it seems to stop someone right there and then hits flat land, which is right next to, again, Lisa's house. And the backs of all of Maple Vale.
So to Isaac's point in the beginning of the meeting, that is the next permit that they're seeking. So the work that we did accomplish, that 500 feet, we had in place a small permit on Maple Vale Phase 2 was to do some minor dredge work, not nearly as much as we did. We were able to extend that to a maximum of 500 feet to an existing permit we already had in place that was going to take place under Phase 2. So the next step Isaac's team is working on is getting us another permit.
Through the state.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
Pennsylvania Department of
Environmental DEP is to do that parcel there. The parcel on the east side of Taylorsville Road, the one that you pointed out last week. That is what Isaac's team, they need drawings, engineered plans. They have a lot of things that Isaac's team is putting together to get that permit in place because it's not just it's not considered almost maintenance. It's a large scale length of project. So it's an in-depth permit.
So, Mr. Adams, it's not simply just a written permission or request to the Department of Environmental Protection. There's information that needs to be engineered and prepared in order to submit that permit.
And we asked you 2
Well-
years ago for it.
Well, again,
And you said 2 years ago you're going to do stuff for us. So, I mean, I want to say thank you. But really, 2 years ago, I know you guys all weren't here, but we had a lot of empty promises. So that's where you're getting the
yeah,
distrust.
completely understand that. And
So, okay, so the water comes down from the basin through their own right of way on our property and goes right to the canal, and that's all good. And so now we have to request help. A lot of help to get the permit from the state almost immediately, because now all the water that flooded over the creek, that flooded that gentleman's house, and is now not going to flood anybody's yard because you did a great job. And it's going to come down to that bottleneck on our land that we own, Lower Makefield owns, but has the Bridge Authority has the right of way on. It's going to come there, and then it's going to come back into Mapleville because it's going to come like a billion miles faster. So we really need help quickly so that can be dug out soon, so that the Canal Authority even can get their 2 cents in, because we don't want to flood out the floodplains of Yardley Borough, where I, of course, remind you, I moved from, because even though they only flooded once since I've been here, and I've flooded 3 times, I knew I couldn't handle the flooding. So we'd like to do that fast, Isaac. And I don't know how fast it can get done in 40 hours a week, or when you're going out and looking at properties and problems and stuff. But
I'm sure we are working on that as efficiently as we can to get that permit as quick.
I've been hearing it for 3 weeks. I know
Yeah.
you are. I know you are, but I need it to be done sooner, because it did rain the other night and I don't think my whole neighborhood slept. Yep. I mean, my cars were on my lawn. I was home alone. It's just not cool. So if you need me to come up, I'll quit work for a month and help you write whatever permits you need. I'm in the business. I can do it for you. Okay. And then the other part, I have very big concerns about. Wait, I don't want to end that. You understand that needs to be done. And are you planning to do it soon? I know you're planning to get the permits done soon, but are you planning to are you going to wait a whole year getting contracts out and 100% designs out for that property to get dug
We're
out?
actively working on that permit. So I know this meeting is a recurring one.
I mean, like,
we're doing
what's the
permit
time
now, then
frame?
We'll be able to give a more, accurate timeline of the work once that permit's gotten.
How long does it take to make a permit? You have to do a design. Are you doing it? Or are you contracting out with the guy that was on the TV last time?
Our office, Remington and Vernick, is doing that as the township engineer.
So he's doing it while you're out looking at properties and damage, right?
We
So
have,
you don't
we
have
have
to
a whole
worry.
team that works on it, correct? Yeah,
Okay, so
it's
2 weeks?
Surveyors, it's designers, the people that put together the permit package, and then we also are, speak with the DEP in the hopes that when we package it up and submit it, there's not a bunch of comments and it comes back and there's a whole recurring cycle. So that's part of making sure that we have everything lined up and all the ducks in a row. So when it goes to DEP, they know what's coming, and also they're kind of on the same boat, and we can speed up that approval process.
So all the projects are on the schedule that we're currently working on. So we'll have those dates. So actually, so for dates, that will be reflected on the schedule, which we're hoping by next week, we'll have that schedule available.
Like next
Then
Wednesday's board
just-
meeting?
I'm sorry, what's up?
Next
yeah,
Wednesday's board
prior-
meeting, you're
prior to-
thinking you'll
yeah,
have a
prior
schedule?
to that, yeah. Yes, the schedule will be dispersed, yes. Yes, schedule will be distributed, yes.
Okay.
In a variety of means. I mean, it could be, we can provide you with a copy of the schedule directly. We could share the schedule at this meeting. We could post the schedule on our township website, or we're not going to just use one means of distribution for the schedule. You're welcome.
Okay, can I move on to the next one? That one's a really big concern for me. I feel like that's the only one I should be talking about, but
if I could just include, so in terms of priority, within our company, Remington and Vernick, we have multiple teams working on all of these projects. So it's not that we're just focusing on one. We're simultaneously going as fast as possible. We're working late nights and through the weekend to accomplish this for the township. So.
Well, it's not farmed out. They are representatives of Remington Vernick, who's the consulting engineer for the township. So these folks are consultants that work for the township.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I guess since we had the meeting until today's meeting and going forward, that priority number one was that emergency permit. And like I said, that was achieved yesterday with the DEP. There's the one with the DCNR, and then this permit with
Wait,
the additional.
What was that one for? What was the first one that you got approval for?
The emergency permit for where the washout hole is down at 18 and 20 Maplevale. That was that emergency permit.
Okay.
There's the permit with DCNR that's kind of also with the canal there. And Derek mentioned this additional stretch that requires permitting. That's the one that's kind of next on the list of priorities to make sure it gets out. And try to
So
get
the
it
canal is second because that's where the 18 and 20 fled into, right? Is that the?
Yeah, the
canal
DP
permit?
and the DC, they're two separate agencies, so it's kind of simultaneous, but we were able to receive the emergency permit, and now we're trying to work with DCNR to get their blessing as well for that work to get underway.
Yeah, so the permitting agency is actually the Department of Environmental Protection. DCNR is the property owner. So that's why the interface with DCNR. They're the property owner of the canal.
Okay.
And so ultimately that water is being discharged into the canal.
Right.
So
I lived at the.
Further on that same project, so we received the emergency permit from DEP. We are also about to submit for a general permit, which is needed afterwards. So we've already taken that step, which I think we had about 60 days to get, but we're nearing close to submitting that ahead of time. So.
And what is that one for?
It's the same project, but it's called a general permit. So we have the emergency permit first to act quickly, and then they want you to follow up with a general permit. It's what it's called through DEP, and they give you, I think it's about 60 days, but we are almost in the position to resubmit that or to submit for that. So that as well.
And that's just to keep the creek clean?
that's more of an administrative process. I mean, that's not additional work. But Paul's just articulating that these are some of the things that they're working on that are required of the emergency permit.
Okay, I think you talked over me a little bit, so, okay. Just I'm excited that you're working really hard and that you got someone else working on it, not you guys, to get a permit to clean out that section, to talk to the bridge authority and to the canal authority and DEP, so that we all can get water from the creek to the canal or to the river. I don't care.
Mhm.
The last thing, not the last thing, the other thing I want to talk about is that in the very beginning of the meeting, you spoke about doing 100% design and giving us time to look at it at 100% design. When I've had people look at my 100% designs, it's just a disaster, because then I have to pay the contractor again to redo the design, because I've gotten like 14 really good points that we didn't put into the design. So what do you think about maybe letting us look at it at 30% design? Is that too hard?
No, that's
Like maybe at one of these meetings?
Yeah, to clarify what I was saying before, it's not like it's completely done and ready for construction. What it is that before it goes to that bidding phase, for our process, we have the engineering, substantially put together. And through the process, the preferences to have that feedback, from the beginning. In this case, this Maplevale Phase 1, Phase 2 was split up for just timing of grant funding. Per the last Board of Supervisors meeting, they said, forget the waiting for grant funding. Let's get the second phase going. So where it stands now, we're taking a fresh look at making sure stormwater wise, it's going to be hitting on those important factors. Right after that would be when we would bring it back to the township staff and to the residents and say, let's all get another last look at it before we would get it ready for bidding out to construction. So a new project, to your point, it wouldn't be that far into the project to get that look by the residents. It would be, maybe like a halfway point or something where
Sooner.
you have enough to look at to understand what our thoughts are, and then,
Half
get
of
the
our
feedback
developments
and-
are engineers, so we're fine.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, very good. Any idea when that'll be done?
For that, next
The
phase
phase
of
two?
the project there. I'll have a better date, if you will, for then hopefully the next time
Wednesday.
we meet, but, we're pushing to hopefully have that within.
The
as soon as
schedule.
We can, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And within weeks, yeah.
Okay, this week, one of my neighbors said that someone from the town was going to come down and look at her backyard because, if you'd like to see the pictures after this meeting, her backyard is between Taylorsville and Meadow. And she had no backyard. It was covered in water and mud. And it was several inches up on her back door window, which then eventually did flood into her house. There's a swale back there. Anyone get called for this appointment that they missed?
Mr. Jeffries, is that the,
It could have been Mr. Jeffries or a woman named Pauline. Did you meet with him? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was disappointed that she waited around all day and then nobody came. So.
well, there
okay,
was
so-
nothing scheduled, so I'm not sure who was waiting for.
Oh, I
whom.
thought she had been scheduled twice, I believe.
Nobody has scheduled anything. Mr. Jeffrey sent the email to the wrong email address initially. He acknowledged that in an email this morning. We responded to him, I'm sorry, last evening. We responded to him first thing this morning.
Can you do me a huge favor since we're all having huge difficulty on who to communicate with? Can you give me one email address that's good or one phone number that's going to be answered?
So again, we've asked you to send folks to send information to admin, ADMIN at lmt.org.
Okay, I know that address. Okay. Okay. And then the last meeting at the very end of the night at 11 o'clock, somebody said maybe we should put a moratorium on building on the agenda for this last week's meeting. So 2 weeks ago, the very first meeting that we all came in and complained at the very end of that meeting, Mr. Lewis, I want to say, he sat in Majewski's seat.
Okay.
Said, why don't we put something on the agenda for this past meeting to not stop building on all the farms, but to stop building while we fix this flooding. Did that get put on the agenda? Did anybody talk further about it? Did it get overlooked?
No, the solicitor spoke on that issue as part of his report at the last meeting. So there's nothing statutorily that permits us to put a moratorium on development. So he did do the legal research and the analysis on that issue. But again, we're governed by state statute. So the municipality's planning code dictates what we as a local jurisdiction have
the power to do.
Have to do. And so again, we're
You're sort of
unfortunately
tied. Yeah.
It's
I mean, I think our development was also one of those kinds of developments. Somebody developed it and then gave it to the town for your responsibility like 60 years ago. The concern, I guess.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I know there's a lot of focus on new development, but a lot of these issues are caused by what I would refer to as historic development. So standards today, from a development standpoint, are much different than what standards were at the time. And so as we're seeing with Maplevale, which is a community that was, again, developed in the 50s and 60s with limited stormwater infrastructure, no infiltration requirements. So as Derek was referring to the work that the Joint Toll Bridge Commission had to do in terms of its highway project or PennDOT now has to do, as you know, those standards are a lot different. And so the philosophy associated with stormwater at one point was just to convey and move it on and not necessarily treat stormwater on site, either from a collection standpoint or even from an environmental sort of treatment standpoint. And so I do understand the sensitivity to additional new development as it relates to this township, but a lot of this is related to historic development and when this community urbanized
Right.
and the lack of infrastructure that was installed at that time. So
I
we-
totally agree.
we need to retrofit those circumstances
Mhm.
and recognize what the source is so that we can come up with solutions. And
The,
so,
when Prospect, I have limited time here. I know you're all new, so except for Mr. Majewski. That Prospect Farms, that development above our neighborhood, that's when I saw the big flooding coming. And I suspect that their drainage wasn't that great. So it's not really all new stuff. It's just that it might fit standards, but it's not taking thought that you just took up several acres of farmland with houses and permanent non-saturated driveways and stuff like that. So,
Right.
okay, I appreciate your point, and I appreciate that phase 2 is going to cure us, and we're not going to have any of these
yeah,
problems.
and I think you make an important point. Again, my professional work has not been in this area of the Commonwealth. It's been in central Pennsylvania, where I would say that the regulatory requirements that are imposed on central Pennsylvania communities is much different than the regulatory requirements that are imposed upon communities in southeastern PA, meaning that because they're located in, for example, the Chesapeake Bay watershed, their requirements are much more stringent than the requirements that even exist here in southeast PA, which is somewhat counterintuitive. You think a more urbanized area would be a little bit more progressive in terms of some of these
Well,
things.
that's correct. No, I don't think
And so, but your point about, taking this conversation from minimum compliance, which in this area of the Commonwealth, in some ways is being dictated by, Act 167 plans and those kinds of things that have not been updated in 40 years.
Well, we hope you put your 2
It
cents in,
is-
since you know
is-
the Chesapeake.
needs to change. And so we can't look at things from a minimum compliance standpoint. We need to look at things from a quality of life standpoint. And
My
I think if
quality of
you-
life has
if-
changed drastically. I can't even retire because of
correct.
this is my 3rd flood, and it costs
I
30,000 to fix what I've got. I mean, I don't even have a
understand.
beautiful home on the hill,
I
you know,
understand.
so
I understand.
I'm a little over it. I need you to fix it. I need you to fix it.
Understand.
I've got stomach issues as a result of it.
Understand.
Okay.
Yep.
It's not just, and the only reason you're not like really in shit shape is because all those people were on vacation except for Pat, who was having the party. Nobody was there to man the holes. They man the holes. They man the gutters. You've been told about that. That's the only reason it didn't drain immediately, was because there was stuff in them, and they usually man them. And the way that water came in, they would have gotten killed too. I mean, that's why other people died under this circumstance. So, nobody comes and mans our gutters, I do believe the other night a policeman came through, so that we were grateful for that. I'm not sure what one person can do. We have like half a dozen people out there. So,
Understood.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Adams.
Richard Adams, 221 Taylorsville Road. Been living here since December 10th, 1949, and have seen the unfortunate way that this township does things and how they grant variances, and more variance to developers so they can get houses built, which creates more taxes than the farmland that has been there when I arrived here. Okay, let's start with Taylorsville Road. The ability for that creek to rise and then come up the stormwater drain and onto Taylorsville Road must stop. There is the 2 that the Toll Bridge Commission put there as part of this recent upgrade to their bridge. There's the 1 that Lower Makefield Township put there that's in the pavement. The 2 that I first mentioned are in the curbs. There was no need to put those there, none whatsoever. In order to successfully stop water from going into Maplevale, down Taylorsville Road, I would hope that all 5 of you agree that those inlets into the creek
must be done away with. And you have the ability to do it. We can do anything we want to do. If you want those to stay there physically, the pipe going into the creek, and when the creek gets too high, comes up out of the creek and out to the grates and down the road. You have that property on the east side there after 240 Taylorsville Road that you could, the one grate and or enlarge the pipe that the Toll Bridge Commission put there with probably no permission whatsoever from DEP or anybody. Take that down and go down your property to the canal with it. Just the water off the road, not the creek. I'm not talking about the creek now. The water that ends up on the road just by a normal rainstorm. But that reverse flow out of the creek is the major problem that allows it to come down Taylorsville Road and Maple Vale Drive. I hope you're all thinking in that direction. And it's not that much water.
As I explained last time, and I don't know, maybe you weren't here. So the inlets you're referring to on Taylorsville Road, they are not township inlets.
I'm well aware of
Right.
that,
So when
but it still has to be addressed, and the township has to support it in writing
so
and not back off on it.
So PennDOT is currently working on installing flap gates on those outlets. So when this creek does rise up, the flow will not backflow out of those inlets. PennDOT is working on securing the necessary funding and materials to have that accomplished. They are working on that.
Thank you. Okay, now there's another one there that with that 500 feet, 450 feet, whatever you cleaned out. There's another one there that was put there at the same time that the Highland Drive Bridge was put there. It's all plugged up. Please leave it plugged up.
I don't know which one you're referring
That's the
to.
one on this side where you took the silt and dirt out of the ditch past the Skinner property.
So PennDOT removed the dirt out of that ditch that you're referring.
No, the other week when you got,
So if you're referring to the swale along Taylorsville Road, PennDOT cleaned that out at our request to help drain the road. That was an outcome of the meeting with the maintenance team. That was a swale that was cleaned out by their team. That was not done by us to get to that pipe that you're referring to that backflows. So their next step is to replace that pipe that goes to the creek and put a flap gate on that also to, again, prohibit flow from backflowing out of the creek when the creek rises. You need to be able to drain Taylorsville Road from normal rainflow events.
that's why I'm saying you need to put in storm drains over in Mapleville, which you wasted a ton of money doing it down at Mapleville East entrance. You know, all that money should have been spent at Mapleville North entrance.
The problem with that, and we're working with PennDOT, PennDOT's going to look at a potential capital improvement. We cannot make the water go uphill. The grades unfortunately do not work that way.
The canal is at a lower level. You don't.
I understand, but if you want us to drain to our property, correct?
Yeah, put a
That is-
basin in there.
That is uphill from the intersection of Mapleville and Taylorsville Road. It is uphill. The grades unfortunately do not work.
The property
Yes,
that is on the south side of the toll bridge, that's your property.
yes.
Okay. I bet somebody will gladly take the soil from you, build a big basin there and let it drain there before it goes to the canal. The canal people would probably like that.
We will look into that for you.
I would hope you look into it quickly. Okay. Now let's go back to Maplevale Drive, where April's home is, and the other gentleman that had the pipe go through the yard with short lengths of concrete, pre-stressed concrete pipe. What kind of pipe are you going to replace that with? Dual, side by side material?
The pipe that was there was reinforced concrete, it was not pre-stressed. It was RCP, reinforced concrete pipe, correct. The new material that the engineer has recommended is corrugated HDPE dual wall.
Why don't we use ductile iron with a bolted flange on the end, so it could never come apart under pressure.
Drainage pipe should not be under pressure. It's a gravity
Because
drain.
in this instance,
I,
how did it come apart if it wasn't under pressure?
Because of the erosion that occurred in the yard.
Yeah, because it came out through the bell. Somewheres it leaked. It was
No,
ductile
no, it was-
iron with a bolted flange is where they use very high pressure water from reservoirs. What
you
happened?
also, you do not bury flange pipe. It needs to be movable, but the pipe failed due to erosion is what caused pipe to fail.
Yeah,
Let's
from
put
from
the
everything we
best
observed,
pipe
like the
possible in
pipe
there
didn't
so it
blow out
never
within the
fails.
pipe.
Why spend money now and do it mediocre and down the road, it comes apart again?
I don't think our approach right now is taking a shortcut in any regard. And from what we observed, the water or the hole that was created there wasn't from the pipe busting from within and leaking through the ground. It was from, as mentioned, the erosion at the end digging out and the water coming above the surface that exasperated what started to be dug out. If the pipe would have blown out, you would have seen a lot more of the pipe in the canal. It would have been blown through and everything else. So everything we observed and the pipe that fell apart after the ground underneath it was gone. That's what we the forensic, if you will, afterwards.
And not to go into great detail on that, but that information has also been confirmed by other outside agencies as well. It was not as a result of a pipe failure. It was a result of the erosive condition because of the overland flow.
The
If I could just-
land right after the curb was much higher.
Hmm.
Like you said, came apart from some erosion underground. Not, the water didn't come out of the street, Mapleville Drive, it up.
It did. I mean, if
Good.
you get the mud line on the people's properties is 4 feet in their backyard. They had 4 feet of water in their backyard that made its way to the canal.
Station than what the area we're talking about in April than the other gentleman's yard.
They had 4 feet of water, mud lines on their property. So when that water eventually got to the canal, because it built up 4 feet, reached the banks of the canal, flowed down the embankment of the canal and started a cutback effect and started eroding and breaking the pipe and causing it to get worse. And it was just a catastrophic failure. Sorry, because again, once it's it was erodible material. So once the erosion started, it just kept going. It was like as a kid, when you build a little pond of water in the sand and you break it, it just starts going fast and going, getting worse and worse and worse. The other two, what? I'm sorry. There's only one other pipe. It's on between the properties of 16 and 18 Mapleville where the erosion did not occur at the embankment of the canal. There's one pipe that failed between 18 and 20. That's a single. There's only 2 pipes that drain Mapleville. There's only 2 pipes that drain Mapleville. The existing 1950s pipe between 16 and 18, and an additional one was installed in 19. I don't know about, I'm not sure. I'm not, yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't. Talking about the same thing.
Eric, you want to
Anyway.
state again the proper year? Yeah, I've been here since 1949. That development wasn't built until mid-1950s.
Mid 55. Did I say 1955? The plans that we have were 1955, 1956. Give or take. I don't have them in front of me.
All right,
And yeah,
now, we're planning on putting 2 pipes in between April's property and the gentleman toward Yardley.
that is the intent of the plan.
Where? The end that water will enter to go to the canal. Where will the end to the west be?
Where the existing inlet locations are. Is to,
Going to cross Mapleville Drive to also have 2 pipes leading from the double catch basin on the west side, cross from April's house and the gentleman's.
what you see there now with a single pipe, the intent is to multiply that. You have a double of that.
You are going to dig up the street and run the pipe to both double inlet storm sources.
Isaac, I believe that's what the plan has, is inlets on both east and west, correct?
It's the double that outlet pipe capacity. Yeah, so it's from the, I don't know which direction side that is, from the lower side of Maple Vale out to the canal. So that's the low point in the neighborhood, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do is to double the pipe capacity that's going to the canal from that.
From both
Roadway.
sides of the street.
There's no street cut that was proposed.
Yeah, right now it's the doubling the pipes that's going from the street out to the canal.
Out to the canal.
The pipe that goes from the other curb to
Avoiding
that
my
one.
Question, sir. It's
I'm
very
trying to answer
simple.
for you.
You
The
can
one
say
that's on the
answer
other side of the
question with
street.
No,
yes.
it's one side of the street.
Yeah, it's from
You're
the
only
one
doing
side.
Okay, it is
side
no.
of the
The
street.
answer is no.
Okay,
side of the
so
street.
some cardboard and wood and whatnot in a terrible storm floats down the street and plugs up the drain on the canal side. Now where are we? Why do we do jobs that could be done better instead of shortchanging ourselves? I think everyone in this room, if you're going to go that far, another, whatever the width of the street is, 18 feet or whatever it is, to do the one on the opposite side of the street would make good sense, wouldn't it? Instead of just doing half of the street. We all know that drains get blocked up, and if the other one is already there, another few lengths of pipe hopefully would prevent the mess that we got ourselves into here. Please consider
I've noted it. We'll take a look.
doing both sides of the street. Now, down the street further toward Yardley, you've got a double, is that a single or a double basin there? The other one that she's talking about.
That's a single.
It's a single? Is it on both sides of the street?
Yeah.
Yeah, two. Okay, understand. Okay. Okay. Now, the problem of the horrendous amount of water that came down the stream. My understanding that the, what was it called? Hillwood Terrace, which is now Upton and Concord and Hilltop and whatnot, that development was built and the impervious surface study doesn't exist. It was before it was required. Is that true?
That is correct. We do have one plan that does have a drainage tabulation for the storm sewer inlets that were in there, but that's the extent of the records we have for that.
Understand. Now, as part of doing this job properly, so it doesn't rear its ugly head later, I'm proposing that as part of this, that a study be done of the Hillwood Terraces, I believe it was called. I don't see any signs there anymore, but that's what it was. The former Mets property that was sold to some developer, and all those areas up there were developed. And curbs were used, and people have doubled the size of their driveways, patios, you name it, that creates a much larger impervious surface than if we had a study to show what it was back when it was built. Okay, now, Makefield Chase, is there impervious surface water studies for that development?
I believe there are, that is in our archives and we're going to pull that out. We do have the full set of plans scanned for that development. I believe that was done around 1976, 1977 roughly. The Pennsylvania Stormwater Management Act was in 1978. However, what I've seen in Lower Makefield's files are that we started mandating stormwater management studies prior to that Pennsylvania Act. So I believe we do have a study in our files, and I just need to pull it out and locate that.
Now, I would assume the area where Highland Drive comes down to go out to Dolington Road, where some water obviously drains into the stream we're talking about. Hopefully, but doubtfully, there is a study of how much water ends up there. But
I'm sorry, in which place?
with Hilltop Drive comes down and crosses the stream before it gets out to Dolington Road.
No, off of Dolington, Hilltop
Right. now,
goes.
starting up at the beginning
Yeah.
of the water flow, and we'll work down. Okay, now, what's the next place where it crosses before it goes into the Foreo estate? Is that
Edgemere.
Edgemere? Okay, hopefully, but like you say, it's doubtful that there is any study ever done for eight properties there that dump on, well, and even the road, what comes down the road. As
Well,
part of-
they, sometime around 1990, 95, they did replace the culverts underneath Hilltop Road and Edgemere
with bridges.
with much wider
Yes,
culverts.
yeah.
I think it was a 48-inch pipe, and then they almost double the size to a rectangular box, like 4 feet by 8 feet. There should be a study on that. We do not have that in our records, but I have requested the prior township engineer to look in their files to see if they could provide us with that information. And hopefully they'll find that in our archives and get that to us shortly so we could look at that.
Yesterday, I looked at that pipe coming from the Makefield Chase, where it dumps into the stream. And wow, boy, that water must have been really coming out of there.
Yeah, I believe that basin filled up to the top and even went over the spillway, the emergency spillway. That's how much water came down, 5 to 7 inches in 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on where you were.
Okay. Makefield Chase, that pipe, wherever it goes till it gets to a municipal street with curbs and catch basins. By chance, does Lower Makefield have an easement where that pipe goes to the first place where it gets to a street? That pipe could be enlarged if some engineering outfit suggests that it would be helpful. Just an idea. It must have been, I mean, the amount of water must have come out of there must have been horrendous. I mean, this
Like I said, that basin filled, that basin was full. The basin that you're referring to, is that Makefield Chase?
I didn't see a basin there. No, I'm
Oh, you need to go up.
into the creek.
Yeah, go up over the berm. You'll see the other side of that pipe. That's a basin right there that you see off of you see that off of Dolington Road. If you're on Dolington Road, you pass Lower Hilltop on your right-hand side. That is the outlet structure for that basin.
All that street area up there goes into that basin, then goes into the creek when it overflows.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, now let's move downstream to the Foreo estate.
Fiore. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure there's no study whatsoever as to how much water that property dumps into the creek.
I do not believe so.
It's been there 2 weeks.
And they also even have pipes coming from Dolington Road and from across the street in the Pine Brook Farms development. Part of that
Discharging onto there?
goes onto their property through a number of streams that lead into that unnamed tributary that eventually gets down to Taylorsville Road and out to the canal.
I understand. I walked back there in the 1950s, there's nothing else to do but press bets on.
The good old days.
Yeah, right. Okay, now, when the water leaves the Foreo property, now we get into what DeLuca Homes did. Yes, there's a study of that. Say, as a commenter, I can't understand, the whole parameters of that study. Is there any thoughts that those basins that DeLuca Homes turned over to you folks as Lower Makefield Township needs to be heavily restudied and determined that those basins are proper, adequate, and does need some adjustments, depth changes, whatever, to slow down as much water as possible when we have large rain events. I went back in there in good clothes after the flood, and I didn't see hardly any mud in those retention basins. Like, they're up too high and nothing could go into those and then later slowly drain out to go down toward Taylorsville. I really feel that area needs to be looked at by an outside company and make recommendations as to their adequacy.
Yeah, I think all of the items you're talking about, Mr. Adams, are items that when we talk about sort of doing a comprehensive drainage basin study, those are all items that we would consider. When I say looking at upstream conditions, these are all the types of things that we would have somebody look at.
We want to hopefully do it as best as possible so that
Correct.
unless we get into something as terrible as this was, which can happen X number of years down the road, we try to
Correct.
prevent as much as possible.
Correct.
Okay.
And actually, Mr. Adams, I believe we got a picture from one of the neighbors to the basin of Prospect Manor. And they didn't understand that they had a detention basin in their backyard, and they're wondering why the whole thing filled up with water. So the one basin there filled up to the top, but did not overflow the spillway, which means that it kind of worked as designed. It retained all of the water during the storm to release it at a slower rate. So that's actually a newer one than Makefield Chase or the others. So the standards constantly get updated and get incrementally better. But as Mr. Kratzer said, this would be part of the comprehensive study to look at everything on the upstream area.
Well, it needs some tweaking. Okay, now moving downstream, neighbor told me today that there was some people in the creek bed between Highland Drive and the PennDOT Taylorsville Road Bridge. Any thoughts of what they were doing? Anybody? Go and look.
That's what we've been referring to the whole time. That's the 500, 450 feet, 500 feet of stream that we cleaned out.
No. I'm talking from Highland Drive to PennDOT's Taylorsville Road Bridge.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Again, per what you said last time, PennDOT was working to clean out their bridge. So I haven't been down there today. I don't know what day it was, but yeah, but they are working to clean out their bridge under Taylorsville Road.
Great.
And again, maybe that's what you're referring. I don't know.
That stretch from Highland Drive to the PennDOT Bridge belongs to the Toll Bridge Commission. That's the way it's on the maps. Now, it doesn't come out clearly and say it like I said.
It's PennDOT's right away on that stretch because it's along Taylorsville Road. It would be their. It's in their right away.
The Highland
North, east, south. Yeah, that would be PennDOT's right away at that point. But again, regardless, it's in the next permit phase. They're trying to get permits to clean everything out as much as possible.
Those trees that are growing just before the water goes under the Taylorsville Road Bridge toward the canal, they need to be gotten out of there as soon as possible. They are causing a backup of the water that then rises so high, ends up on Taylorsville Road, and then goes down Mapleville Drive. You got the temporary permit from Highland Drive up through the two properties, Skinner property being the second one and behind the Griffith property, which is great, but that's a bottleneck there right now. And before the next hurricane or whatever, we're not talking about a lot of work there. Somebody showed up with a clamshell bucket and went over top of the railing. They'd have that in a dump truck and gone in a short order. Because all you got to do is look at it.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are regulations, and the Department of Environmental Protection does exist, and that's the permits that they're seeking to allow us to do that in the next step.
We need that permit ASAP.
We understand.
Yeah, and I believe part of this would be PennDOT. And I think that's probably why PennDOT had a few guys out there looking at it to,
That's who was there today. I was in the hospital. the whole day.
okay.
Okay, let's cross Taylorsville Road. And as soon as the water goes underneath the Taylorsville Road Bridge. Let me bring. Gray, I'm sorry, the gray is the property line. And the water evidently gets right up to the property line and then it stays on the Toll Bridge Commission's property until it gets to here. Me saying to you before about the inlet culverts here at Island Drive, the 4 of them that I feel, let me think, 4. Oh, it's only no, 3 or 4 that are very active, and then there's the one that I don't think they cleaned it out. If they could only be, come over here and connect in right here. So then any water that would ever be on Taylorsville Road, just a normal rain or whatnot, would drain to this spot. Now you sent me a thing that said it's 12 feet difference between here and here. I hope you're right, that it is 12 feet difference. That at some time with, I guess you got to get permission from the state, is redirect the creek from here across your property to here, and then we get the Toll Bridge Commission out of the picture completely. I think you'll agree with me, they're tough people to deal with.
The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP, does not like to have streams relocated because, it's the unintended consequences that you might not be able to do it. They have very strict requirements on that because shortening the path that the stream takes actually increases the flow, increases velocities, and can create problems. And that's something I think we agreed that we take a look into.
My lifetime, I've seen all over when somebody was doing a relocation of a highway project, they change the creek, they move it here, there, whatever.
That's actually one of the problems we're dealing with upstream, and that they did that. And it's the unintended consequences that back in the day when they did that, it maybe made sense. Now we find that it's created problems.
What's your thoughts on having a retention basin here to help the canal people so that when we do have a large flow, that the canal doesn't end up with all the gravel and whatever, that it can end up in retention basin, be cleaned out, and they would be happy. You got 14.4 acres, a lot of space. You can put a small one in, make it into an ice skating rink.
Well, I think we said we'd take a look at that. Yeah. If it made absolutely zero sense, we would have told you that, but so it is something worthy of taking a look at.
Because it's such a jungle back there, you realize it's concrete footings, well, even higher than footings, walls back in there that were duck pens when it was McCormick's Duck Farm. It's not like you're going to go back in there. All that concrete that's totally hidden now with all the growth. There is obstructions back there.
Yeah, I've never seen the concrete because of that.
Yeah, I trapped that creek as a 10-year when we moved here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Sure. Okay. Happy to address anyone online at this point.
Bringing in our first online caller.
You're currently muted, so.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Larissa
Lizecki.
Lizek. I'm at 18 Maple Vale. So forgive me if you've answered this question, but I have a couple of things that to do with the construction that you've already started, which we really appreciate, but with every day that there's no construction, it's making us a little nervous. Do you have all the permits necessary to complete the first phase of building up the land towards closest to our homes? I mean, has everyone cooperated? Do you have all the permits? Because I only heard about the DEP. Do you have the DCNR's permit?
We do not have consent from DCNR at this point, so we continue to try to obviously put pressure on them to respond.
Is it a delay? Obviously, it's a delay on their end. Do they understand the urgency of getting this done or getting this taken care of? Because with every day we don't have construction, we're getting closer to September.
No. Yes, we understand. We've conveyed to them. DEP is working again almost directly with them to help us convey to DCNR the urgency and push it along. I know David's had conversations with the state rep and state senator to work with DCNR to get this approved on their side. To understand the urgency to get this thing wrapped up. That the ball's in their court. So I know they are working with them. Yes, they understand.
Any idea when you should hear back from them?
I mean, we're hopeful within the next day or so. Again, we just interfaced with DEP and the senator's office to again use both the agency sort of interagency sort of discussion between DEP and DCNR, and then also sort of the resources of the senator's office and Representative Warren's office. So hopefully, again, within the next day or so, we would have consent from DCNR as the property owner.
Okay. My second question is about phase 2. Can you be a little bit more specific? I'm just getting a little confused. What's phase 1 and phase 2? Is phase 2 the construction of both the drains or just the one between our house and the Gamble's house, which is the older of the two drains?
Yeah, I could take that. So what we had, and again, not to be confusing. So in order to secure your properties, we just went in there, and I don't want to use the word phase 1 or phase 2. We wanted to initially secure your properties, which we have done. We filled as much possible within reason. And the next step, I'm going to call it, is to receive the permits and do the work out towards the canal. Like I said, we got DEP's permit in hand. We need DEP's approval, DCNR's approval. I'm sorry, DCNR's approval to go to the next step, which would be the pipes, fill the embankment along the canal, armor, and again the pipes, which would be the 2 pipes. So that is the next step. To finish up your properties and complete that drainage back between 18 and 20 Maple Vale. So that is a project, I'm going to call it, as a whole. So we completed step 1. Step 2 requires the permits. When we were reusing the term phase 1 Maple Vale drainage project, that goes beyond before the flood. That was kind of that whole project that took place at the intersection of Taylorsville and Maple Vale, those drainage inlets, which was completed. And then phase 2 Maple Vale drainage improvements is what the engineers are referring to is the inlets and drainage improvements that would be installed on Highland Drive and Taylorsville Road. So that would be what's referred to as Maple Vale drainage improvement phase 2. Is the inlets to be installed at Highland and Taylorsville Road. Does that help clarify it? I'm sorry if that made it worse or better.
So no, it does. What's the timeline for the repair of the drain on the other side, the older of the two, the one that was put in the 50s? When is that going to happen?
That's what the engineers are looking at as a global schedule, because that will come out hopefully within the next week, and we'll have a timeline on that. Because again, unfortunately, that's not quote unquote an emergency repair. So that would have to go through the normal permitting process to do all that stuff. So I would have a better timeline for you guys. Probably I would say within the week when that schedule is revamped to look at that one for you.
Okay. Thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yes.
Hold on.
Hi, it's April.
Hey,
April.
hi, April.
Hi, guys. You answered most of the questions that we had. The only other one that I had that wasn't addressed just yet was, we understand we're still waiting to hear from FEMA and FEMA. Do we have a timeline on that? I mean, we know we're probably not gonna hit whatever threshold they need for the large scale event, but just wondering if we have a timeline on when we might hear if there's any potential for individual assistance.
They have not communicated a timeline at this point, but we can follow up and hopefully have some additional information on that by our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. The only other comments I had were on the erosion, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about that too. But that was the main one for me. Thank you very much. And we appreciate all the work you guys are doing to get this moved quickly for us, especially getting the emergency permits put through. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, April. So hold on, Mr. Adams, is there anyone else online?
Yep, we can bring in the next caller now. All right, Elizabeth is now in the room.
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me? I can't see anybody, but
We can hear you, Elizabeth.
okay,
We
perfect.
can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, it wouldn't let me put my video on for some reason. It said it was disabled. But I live at 186 Taylorsville Road. I don't know if you guys know that property. It's after you pass 95 going towards Upper Makefield. So I'm very close to that border where you hit Upper Makefield. Unfortunately, I don't live in a neighborhood per se. It's kind of just a street and then a few houses. So there's not a whole bunch of us that are affected in that area. I live kind of at the bottom of a hill. Obviously, this was a crisis situation. We've never had flooding like this. Our entire driveway was washed away. Not only was our driveway washed away, my father's house had flooding on the property because everything came down and there was just nowhere for the water to go. It was obviously an emergency situation because within the week, Morrissey was out there changing the tunnel that's in the road. We have 2 tunnels on our property because we have a creek that runs through it. Those tunnels on my property were not changed. So them fixing the tunnel in the road doesn't do anything to help the fact in my property, which is about 3.5 acres. The water has to pass through 2 tunnels to then get to the street. So everything's just going to back up. The other issue I have is that my creek runs all the way up to the golf course that's up the hill because we fall on the bottom of the hill. All of the dirt, all of the silt, all of everything that used to make a creek no longer exists as a creek. It is flat land. And now I have a swimming pool that is breeding mosquitoes in my backyard because there's no creek. It was all filled in. There's no river rock. It used to be this cute little creek with crayfish and little fish in it and a tiny little stream that ran through it. And it is just completely flat. So there's no water even draining down a creek anymore. And you know, I understand that we maybe haven't met whatever the quota is for Lower Mayfield to get funding from FEMA or whichever one it is. But here's the issue. I've been calling Lower Makefield Township every freaking day since that Monday after the storm. When I say every day, I mean every single day. And I did get an email from you guys once, and then I did get another email asking for damage. But there's a lot of people who probably have other damage that don't even know. Nobody's reaching out. Nobody even said to me, hey, we can come look at your property. When I say I have extensive damage, I'm talking over $100,000 worth of damage because there's no driveway. My entire driveway was washed away. Not only was it washed away, there were sections that were 2 feet where you could see that the water rushed through and just took like 2 feet of dirt. It looked like I was on like a mining site and you could just see the geology of the earth where you were looking. All of that has to get filled in with dirt, rocks, blacktop. But what's the purpose when I don't even have a creek anymore because it's completely flat from everything washing down the hill and just making a pond? That water is just literally laying there stagnant and collecting in the backyard. We never had these issues before. I've lived here since 2000. Never had these issues. Things have definitely gotten worse since the golf course went in. I can't tell you. I'm sure that they're going to say that they got all their permits and everything they were supposed to do in the township that they were supposed to do. But the amount of golf balls that I find washing down and the amount of water that comes through there now since the golf course is not meant to support what we have there. I mean, I understand that they probably did what they were supposed to with the township. But you guys didn't look at what it's going to do downstream for them. And then when there's all this water coming, I have a mess on my hands. My dad's house was flooded. The entire basement was at least 2 feet underwater. We lost every single thing that was in that garage, a hot water heater, washers, dryers, all of our equipment for outside, not to mention, like I said, the driveway that needs to be completely redone. All of in the creek where we did have retention walls set up, they were all washed away. And then that's where the creek still exists. There's one spot where it exists. And then you walk a little bit back further, that's still on my property. And like I said, it just goes to flat. I have flat ground with no creek. And then if you keep walking, even once my property ends, I don't know who it backs up into because it's not like a neighborhood. There's no creek for the water to run through. It is literally just water that goes anywhere. So when everybody else also talks about September and more rain coming, it's a problem. It's a huge problem. And I find it kind of sad that, like I said, I've been calling and reaching out to you guys every single day. And nobody's once even said like, hey, we should come out and look at this, or we should do something about this, or, you know, just give us a rough estimate. It was all I was asked about for pictures. I don't live in a floodplain, so I don't have flood insurance. So there's no help for any of this. And again, to bring up what somebody else said, I'm taking 3 hours out of my day at work right now. That's why I'm online. I couldn't be in person because I'm working around the clock day and night when I get home from work, trying to fix the driveway and do things like that, and weekends. And now I'm on a meeting in the middle of the day. I can't afford to take off because I have to put my time in fixing my house. When I say the garage was covered in mud. So once we finally got the water out of there, the amount of mess that's left in there with all of the mud and disaster, everything being thrown out and broken and not fixable. Like, I don't even know where you start with something like this. And the township, in my opinion, has not been any help. I mean, this was a major, major crisis that nobody saw coming. And that's great that you guys are trying to get permits for big things. But how about us community members who you guys got out there and fixed what was going on in the street? But what about us on our property? That's not going to do anything. If it's not fixed on the property and there's not a creek for that to flow into to get to your tunnel that you guys just put in, that tunnel's not doing anything to help anybody. So that's where my concerns lie. And I feel like pretty much we've been left completely by ourselves with no help at all.
If you'd like, this is Jim Majewski here. I could come out to your property and meet with you after work or even during the day, whatever's most convenient for you to look at your situation.
That would be great, actually.
What time would work for you best?
What times are you available? When can you make it happen? Tomorrow?
Whatever time I'm free tomorrow, after about 9 o'clock, until around 7 o'clock at night.
Should I do 6 o'clock, Jerry?
Pardon me?
And whatever, 9 o'clock we could do tomorrow morning. That would work.
Yeah, 9 o'clock in the morning would work, or someone just told me you said 6 at night.
No,
We
at
can
night
meet
I
then.
was going to do 9 o'clock works also, because then I could have my father there also.
Okay, I'll meet you there at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else online?
Yep, bringing in the next caller. All right, Nancy is now in the room.
Nancy McPeak, 24 Maple Vale. I want to echo what I think her name was Elizabeth, just said about thinking about the individual, because when we moved here, we didn't have any disclosure to us that this flooding was a problem here, we didn't know it at all. And I don't know if our realtor has some responsibility. I feel like the township does. And I feel like I trust that you're going to do a good job. I trust that you know what you're doing. You've got good engineers working on it. I don't have those kinds of questions. But my question is, what happens to the individuals who have like lost a third of their house that they can't live in and all of the things that they had down there? What happens to us? Because now we have definitely heard from our insurance company that we are denied any coverage. And, we have I've got a guy who took down wet drywall and is putting up new drywall in the basement now. And I can't afford to pay him. So what are we doing? How am I going to be helped? That's what I want to know. And I don't feel like, I heard you say earlier that it wasn't an infrastructure problem. I can't even believe you said that, because all along you've been saying like infrastructure. I've been hearing infrastructure, and certainly we need at least to have the township commit to maintaining our infrastructure so that it's current, that it's going to take care of the problems the way they are, especially in light of all of the building that's taken place. So what are you going to do for me? That's what I want to know right now. Because I'm not sleeping. I can't. 2 nights ago, we had a rainstorm. I can't take my eyes off the window. I am a nervous wreck. I work every day. I just lost 3 hours of work sitting here, listening to the same conversation happen over and over again. I trust you're going to do the streets. I trust you're going to do what needs to happen with the infrastructure. I know that it didn't get finished before, and I know why my neighbors are angry about it, and I get it. And I'm angry about it too, because I'm suffering just like everybody else. But I want to know what's going to happen for me right now. Thank you.
Yeah, and so those resources in terms of individual assistance, again, that typically that's the jurisdiction of the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, and so that is typically
what
an
happens
area
if
where
they say no because we don't meet whatever? Because now we just heard about people that haven't reported loss. They haven't reported a monetary value for their damage. We've just heard about people like that. So what happens if we don't meet their cap, whatever it is, or the minimum amount, I guess, that we have to meet for them to help us? And I just heard, because I thought, well, at the end of the year, we can take loans and we can call it all a loss and maybe write it off on our taxes. But no, you can't do that unless it's federal. I researched that today. So we're just screwed. Like there's no other way to put it. We are just screwed.
I know the county is also looking at some things in terms of individual assistance. I know the senator's office and the representative's office is looking at what they referred to me as some discretionary funding that DCD, the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, has to provide the potential of some financial assistance on sort of an individual level. But unfortunately at this point, we don't have specific answers to those questions as it relates to individualized assistance. I'll just there are a number of people advocating on your behalf as individuals, and we'll continue to do that. But unfortunately, we don't have, as it relates to individual assistance, we don't have answers at this point, other than what I've just conveyed about the Commonwealth looking at some things and also the county looking at some things.
I wish I never moved here. That's really what I wish. But I would like to make one suggestion for this meeting, which would be that people could have the opportunity to submit questions prior to the meeting. It might keep some of the repetitive questions down to a minimum, and give you guys time to prepare for your answers. I know you've heard a lot of these questions over and over, but this meeting was 2 hours, over 2 hours now, and in the middle of a work day. So that would help me if there could be some way to kind of pull this in a little bit.
Okay, thank you for the suggestion with that. Yes.
Bringing in the next caller now.
So in terms of public assistance, the threshold that was communicated to us was $23 million of damage. So recognizing that this was a very localized event, that's not related to individual assistance. That's like assistance to the community in terms of the work that we're doing as a community to respond to that. I don't know how close we are to that, other than I think that's probably a stretch for us to hit that threshold for individual assistance. So I'm sorry, public assistance. What's conveyed to us is the individual assistance threshold is much more. It's not as objective. It's a little bit more subjective. What was communicated is 100 to 200 impacted households by the event. So the event would not just in our jurisdiction, but if there's impact, obviously in Upper Makefield Township as well, it would be the total of those two. I think we were up to 30 something properties that have reported a loss at this point. And I don't know where Upper Makefield Township is. So again, that's why we're encouraging people to report so that we can hopefully be able to meet that more subjective threshold. Okay. Sure.
Am I up?
Okay, we can look at that. Yep. Michael, is it Michael? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the screen from some
Yeah,
distance.
sorry, I
How are
heard you
you
talking
doing?
in there, but I couldn't really hear what was going on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yep.
All right, I just have two very brief items, and then I'll get out of here for the evening. Number one, talking about the stream at the end of Highland. So it rained on August 3rd. It wasn't a very severe storm, but that stream was full after that rain stopped, after just what that rain was. And I was at the first one of these meetings. It's been a long-standing issue with that stream. It overtops even with events that are not as severe as what happened in July. So just something to keep in mind as you're going forward with your plans. It doesn't take 5 inches of rain in an hour to overtop that stream, even with the work that's been done to this point. That's number one. Number two, am I able to share my screen in here, or are you not able to see it if I do?
You should be able to.
Okay. All right. Are you able to see what I'm sharing?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. So this is the backyard of 221 Meadow.
Michael, are you speaking at this point? Because we're not hearing you, but we did hear you say this is the backyard of 221 Meadow.
This area. My microphone may have changed. With that being said, is there any way to tie in a drain at this spot to the ones that are at the end of Maple Vale in that area? Is that something that would be possible?
221. Sorry, can you repeat that for us, please?
Sure. Sorry, my Bluetooth died. It's been too long. So this is 221 Meadow Drive. It's probably about between 50 and 100 feet from the entrance to Maple Vale on the south side. And this is where most of the water comes from. There's existing drains that are, I know there's going to be additional work done, and this might be a little late in the game with paving already planned, but would there be any possibility of installing drains there that would tie into the drains at the entrance to Maple Vale that would again drain back around the back of Maple Vale as what was intended originally.
We can definitely take a look at if there's a possibility to put something in there to connect. Yeah,
Okay.
like we've been talking about the topography and also just the way to get it in the right direction would be what to look at there. So we'll make a note to visit there and take a look at what's possible.
All right, I know, and I said this before, it's hard to see in the still videos, or still pictures, it'd be easier in a video, but if you look at the photo, you can see where the water is flowing out. It's not going in there and coming back. It's flowing out from Meadow. So that's where most of the water is coming from. And
Well, I'm sorry, what direction's that photo? I was just looking.
so I'm at 6 Maple Vale Drive. I'm on the side where the last house where the pumping station is.
Okay.
Down in the spur. And this is the yard across Maple Vale from me. And the backyard's between 4 and 6 Maple Vale. Okay.
Possible, excuse me, is it possible that we can meet with you when we go out to review that?
Absolutely. You just have to reach out to me because I don't work from home that often. So,
Are you at 6 Mapleville?
I'm at 6 Mapleville, yeah.
You could,
And I'm happy to send my phone number to the admin. You can call and.
Yeah, that would be wonderful if you could do that, Michael, and we'll make sure that the engineers from RVE get that and we can coordinate a time to come out.
All right, absolutely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right.
Is there anyone else online?
Yep, we have Nancy online. I'm going to bring Nancy in now.
The question was, do we have an estimate of the number of people that are waiting online at this point?
This is our last online caller.
Okay, thank you very much.
Nancy, you can press *6 to unmute.
All right, we can't hear Nancy.
Nancy, are you in?
Nancy is in the room, just needs to unmute. You please press *6 to unmute.
Nancy, if you could hear us and you're speaking, you need to unmute. So they're indicating hitting *6 to unmute your computer or your phone. Okay. Are you still seeing Nancy in the room or not?
Yeah, Nancy is still in the room, just hasn't unmuted.
Okay, somebody did make the observation that there was a Nancy right before Michael spoke, so I don't.
This is a different Nancy, but they still have not unmuted. They may have walked away from their phone.
Okay. Does anyone else in the room have any comments at this point? Mr. Adams, you're gonna have, just for the benefit of the others, I'm sorry to make you keep on coming up, but
The DEP permit that you have in hand, what stretch of the stream is that for, that you do have in hand?
the DEP permit that we have in hand in terms of you're talking about in the stream, or because we referenced 2 DEP permits. So there was the existing DEP permit to address the stream on the west side of Taylorsville Road. And then there was a lot of reference to the emergency permit that was issued by DEP, which relates to the canal. So
Which one are you people talking about when you said that you have the DEP permit in hand? Which one is that?
I believe that was probably the emergency permit that we were referencing.
Oh.
So that was on the canal side of things. And that was the one in which we're waiting for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources.
The emergency permit was on the private property of Skinner's and on west side of Taylorsville Road.
That was not an emergency permit. That was a general permit that was issued for purposes of Maple Vale Phase 2, which was those drains on Highlands and some sediment removal that Derek and others were able to have expanded to address the 450 feet that was referred to earlier.
Right, then the one that you have in hand, what stretch of where, what piece of real estate is that?
The properties between 18 and 20 Maple Vale. That's the fix. That's the
Right.
fix the work down by the canal. Correct.
Okay.
Now we have that permit. However, DCNR needs to concur with that permit, and that's what we're waiting to hear back from is DCNR.
All right. Which permit that you're requested that you have not gotten back yet is most important to get the stream unplugged so that if we have hurricanes or some other event will be most beneficial to everybody, mainly the Maple Vale people. Which one do you hope to get at next to unplug the stream from 72 years of brush and you name it, that it prevented the water from getting to the canal in a speedy fashion? What one do you hope?
That's the one we're working on putting in. So 11, GP11, I think it is the category. They all have numbers, but it would be the one to clear out additional lengths of the stream beyond the one that we had in hand before.
On which side of Taylorsville Road? What's the priority? What is the priority?
Both, all of it.
Oh, that'll cover both sides.
Correct. They're getting the full, and I don't know what the length is, 2,000, 3,000 feet. They're getting, the permit is to do X amount of feet from our property that you referenced, those two properties along Taylorsville Road.
Planning on doing it with a outside concern, not Lower Makefield Township.
That determination has not been done yet. We're trying to get the permit first, and then that'll be up to the Board of Supervisors and Township Manager on how to fund that. Yeah.
Have you put together what you want whomever does the work to do with depth, whatever terminology purchase?
That's the plans that we were talking about before that someone asked, why is it so long to like get the permit?
Because remember, a dredging permit, we cannot change the extent of a stream. So we cannot widen, you cannot do any of that. You can take out the unnatural, what's that?
The trash.
Trash, yeah, sediment buildup, things like that. You cannot, when I say the word change it, you cannot make it wider. You can't do anything like that.
Which makes no sense at all, but anyhow. Okay. You can't work in the stream until you get the permit. In order to make it easy, because it's such a jungle, can we issue a purchase order to a contractor to work on the embankments? Don't get his feet wet and clear away. So when you do give out the contract to do within the stream, it can be done quickly, intelligently, with no delay. But at the present time, the jungle, he's going to have to spend a lot of man hours, be able to even get to the stream to start working in the stream bed.
And again, it's what the engineer's working on to go hand in hand, because there are also Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, you're clearing trees, you're clearing brush. There's a multitude of things that go into that.
So all this red tape is nasty for the people that get flooded out. I'm sure you could get away with going back in there and, you know, it's not good. It's not trees, it's brush. It's stuff that's been there for 72 years.
Yeah, we'll look at that again and see if there's any opportunity to advance some of that stuff outside of the permitted work that was being referred to.
Now, that 24-inch pipe that comes down the Toll Bridge Commission's exit off of 295. Where does all that water come from? There's three storm sewer things in the grass there, but it's a 24-inch pipe. I saw them put that across the exit and the entrance ramp, and it's draining water out of that basin that's on the eastbound side of 295 into the creek. I know everybody's saying, oh, no water came out of that basin. That's very hard to believe. And one of you testified that that basin, when it does reach some high level, goes across Taylorsville Road into the creek on the east side. I want to see that because I did not see the Bridge Commission dig up Taylorsville Road and run that across. They did dig up the entrance and exit ramp and came over into the creek.
What creek are you on?
Creek we've been talking.
No, I understand, sir.
Go up there,
So
stand
the
on the railing, put your hands on the aluminum railing and look down and you will see this pipe comes across from the north.
Are you talking about at the Taylorsville Road Bridge, the little creek bridge?
Correct.
So that pipe that you see right there, there's about 3 inlets on that jug handle ramp right there. That is the outlet for those 3 inlets in the grass.
Yeah, I see that.
Yes.
I'm saying that pipe goes across.
It does not drain the basin. That basin outlet structure drains, goes under Taylorsville Road, goes under the on-bound ramp to go across the Joint Toll Bridge Commission into Jersey, and it hits the stream down there on that side.
Okay, I will have to see that. I did not see them put it in. I did see them dig across the entrance and the exit. And spoke to the neighbors, one neighbor, and said, hey, that's a problem. And of course, the 2 stormwater culverts they put in the curb on Taylorsville Road, I says, that's a big problem because the water's going to come up and out and onto Taylorsville Road, which you agree does happen. When the water gets too high in the creek, it overflows first on the Taylorsville Road by coming through the pipe out of the creek, which isn't very long, and up where rainwater should be going down on the paved side of the curb and down Taylorsville Road and into Maplevale it goes.
Okay.
Those 3 have got to be done away with. And you got to drain Taylorsville Road between the curbs somewhere else.
Okay.
Otherwise, you've accomplished nothing. Okay. Now, the 1 permit you're getting will also cover Lower Makefield Township's property upstream from Skinner's property to the estate of Forio. Behind the Prospect Farms development. Agreed, it's all going to be all 1 permit, both sides of Taylorsville Road for Lower Makefield owned land.
You're asking if the permit's going,
It's-
so they're not just going to issue a permit for the entire stretch of a stream length. Right. So, and there's probably going to have to, I would imagine that the department's going to want to see something beyond, I mean, again, you guys speak to that, but we need to, we're not going to tackle a mile's worth of stream length in 2 weeks. It's not going to, or even a single permit. So we do understand that there's upstream conditions that need to be addressed. We're going to walk the stream. We're going to assess those. As you suggested, we're going to have somebody looking at opportunities to whether it's retrofit basins, improve the capacity of the stream. All of those things are on the table. So we're 100% with you in terms of making sure that the evaluation is comprehensive. But we're not going to be able to submit a single permit application that's going to take care of an entire stretch of stream. I'm just trying to manage expectations from that standpoint.
Prioritizing the permit in the order that you're going to submit them. The most important one first to get the work done so they don't end up with mess that they ended up with on their part.
No, understood. And we'll have to look at continuing to prioritize what permit is submitted. Yes.
Okay, now we've had this meeting here today and there's going to be another one where we don't township supervisors meeting with the necessary discussion. There'll be some in the future.
Yeah, that's our intent. Yeah, yep.
Hopefully there's-
And that's not to discourage, obviously, conversation of the board is, that's not to discourage conversation of the Board of Supervisors meeting. It's just to make sure that we're, it's a forum basically to share information. They're obviously working hard, but, we're working hard on a daily basis to address, try to get through these processes.
Shame you can't go out there and get some of the on dry work out of the way so that as soon as you do get the permit, then you can get into the stream and.
Yeah, I think your suggestion of looking at, is there a way to do some of that outside of the jurisdictions of the permit? I think we can look at that. So I think that's a great suggestion that you made.
In your mind, the stretch from Highland Drive to the Taylorsville Road Bridge, how quickly can that be done? Can that be prioritized so that we can get the water underneath of the Taylorsville Road Bridge and get those trees that are growing there out of there?
Isaac, Derek, I don't.
Maybe in writing, go to PennDOT and see what they will do to unblock that bridge so that the water can get under there expediently.
And again, it culminates to the GP 11 or GP, I don't know the permit from DEP, it all culminates to a permit under a bridge maintenance contract. And anyone can go out and maintain a bridge 50 feet upstream, 50 feet downstream.
Oh, well, that's all we need. We only need maybe 20 feet to get those trees that are right there, that are rubbing against the bridge.
Yeah, and that was like the same as all guys. I don't know if maybe PennDOT was out there. It is on their radar.
The trees were still there when I came to the hospital at the time, and the men were gone.
On PennDOT's radar, under their bridge that they're allowed to do.
Can you communicate with the proper person in writing and get an answer as to, can we have this done? Today's Wednesday. We got 2 more days this week. Get a firm date. I mean, we're not talking about a large amount of work. We're talking about, they're not big trees, but there's a whole bunch of them. It's blocking the water from getting under the bridge. Go out and look at it.
Mr. Adams, we'll continue to do whatever we can do to get PennDOT to respond to its responsibilities as it relates to cleaning that out.
Copies to our senator and congressman.
Again, we speak to the congressman and the senator daily. Okay. Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything for this week? Yeah, we were thinking if you find value perhaps weekly at this point, if we need to cut back on frequency, then we can do that. So I think our intent was to have one next week as well. And again, we heard some feedback in terms of the appropriateness of this time. We can look at that. Obviously, next Wednesday is a Board of Supervisors meeting, so that evening probably, obviously it'll conflict. So we'll have to figure that out. But we have everybody's email, so let us look at that, and we'll make sure to get back to you on that. Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you.